Have you ever remodeled a bathroom, a kitchen? Invariably, you found that the project took twice as long and cost twice as much as what you planned. And this is due to the planning fallacy. And the planning fallacy is a well-documented bias in behavioral economics and psychology. And it was first introduced by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979. And they found that individuals and organizations consistently fall into this planning trap. And what happens is that people are overly optimistic when making plans. They assume projects will take less time and fewer resources than they actually do. And they always focus on best case scenarios rather than realistic outcomes. And the reasons for the planning fallacy are that people are ambitious or they're confident at the beginning. They don't want to be a downer and say, oh, it's going to cost twice as much and take twice as long. So they want to look optimistic and they want to set things up so it feels good at the beginning, even though it sets them up for missed expectations later. And there's also social pressure to reduce the time it takes to do something. So for example, let's say my husband says to me, hey, we need to leave. How long will you take? Now in my head, I might think it's going to take me 15 minutes, but I'll tell him 10 because 15 minutes sounds too long. So when people are asked in isolation, they usually give more accurate estimates than they do when there's peers around. And in fact, I worked at a company where for 9 months, leaders stood up to the CEO and we would announce that this internal, really important project was going to be released in a month. And we all knew it was going to take 9 months, that it wasn't ready to go live, but nobody was willing to stand up and say that. So for 9 months, people stood up in these large executive meetings saying, we'll be ready to launch next month. And now when you're working with customers, you want to promise fast time to value, fast go live dates, but then you fail to deliver. And that can be due to your customers may not be ready. Maybe they have the planning fallacy internally and they haven't accurately estimated the time and effort that they have. And also internally, teams fail to account for setbacks, competing priorities, and resource gaps. In fact, I worked with a fintech company and they brought me in because their customer onboarding was taking 8 weeks and they wanted to reduce it to 4 because they could not recognize revenue until they went live with their customers. But when I did my assessment, the reality was it was taking 12 weeks, 50% longer. And when I shared this with the CEO, they were just speechless. They couldn't believe it, that it was taking that long. So oftentimes there might be an internal perception, let's say that something takes X percent of time or X amount of weeks, but the reality is that it's generally 50% longer. So the results are frustrations, your customers lose trust in you, internal teams lose trust in you, and there's delayed value realization for your customers and delayed revenue recognition for your company. So how do you overcome the planning fallacy? Well, first of all, instead of relying on your gut, you want to look at historical data. You want to look at other projects. You want to know the reality of how long things are actually taking and not just your best guess. Another thing you can do, I'm reading the book Essentialism, and in the book they recommend to add buffers. So build in extra time and resource to account for unforeseen obstacles. So add in 50% time and resources because it takes and costs 50% more. And then when you add that 50% in, it reduces stress. So let's say if I was realistic with my husband that it will take me 15 minutes to be out the door, then I don't have to be hyperventilating because I'm trying to get ready in less time. And if you complete sooner, then you get some bonus time. We're going to get there early. Your project's done early. Maybe then you can reach some stretch goals. You need to communicate openly, transparently, and align expectations early so internal teams and customers are really prepared for the actual effort required to get onboarded and implemented and successful with your product. And then set milestones. So rather than having this, go live in 6 months, can you break projects, onboarding into smaller measurable steps that make progress visible and help people feel a sense of accomplishment along the way? So the planning fallacy makes us think change will be easier and faster than it really is. But by acknowledging it up front, you can plan with realistic data and you can build trust and help internal teams and customers be successful. To dive deeper, I recommend my onboarding assessment where we can check out the reality, not the supposed tos at your company. Thank you.